need you to perform at the highest level. Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and a couple of months ago, one of my cousins came to visit me. She works as a trainer for a child care franchise, and it just so happened that they were opening a new center in walking distance to the Pentagon. While we were visiting, she introduced me to the work of Dr. Becky Baker, the author of a book called Conscious Discipline. And despite the fact that Dr. Bailey's work is primarily marketed to the child care industry, I was blown away with how resonant it was with the experience of, 30-something-year-old people, especially military, coming to the Pentagon for the first time. To begin with, the discipline in conscious discipline is really about self-mastery, more about punishing others. And in the childcare setting, that discipline, that's self-mastery, is really about the adult caregivers mastering themselves and then modeling that behavior so that the children can in turn find their own self-mastery. To begin with, conscious discipline is based on a brain state model where there's 3 distinct brain-body states that adults tend to operate in. And these brain-body states are fascinating when you take them from the perspective of military training and professional growth. First and most primitive is just your survival state. This is your threat response. Taps into a person's fight or flight, and it gives them that kick of adrenaline to get the job done. Pretty handy on the battlefield. The staff sergeant starts yelling and the PFC hops over a concrete wall without even thinking about it. The only problem with the survival state is that while you're in it, your brain can't really do anything else. That PFC frantically hopping over the wall is not really in a mental state where he's going to do, radio repair or fill out a 4187. And you can imagine how it can be really problematic if some action officer suddenly drops into a survival state when he's briefing a general officer. The next brain-body state in this whole conscious discipline model is the emotional state. We enter this when we're upset or things aren't going our way. In this state, we fall into kind of an autopilot mode where we don't have control over the words and the tone that we use. Again, this is not a universally bad state. I find that the things that people say when they're in an emotional state tend to be much more genuine and honest. My grandfather used to tell me that if you work with someone for a whole year and you never get angry at each other about anything, well, that means that you've never talked about anything that's important. When the master sergeant throws his clipboard, you know you are in for some open and honest dialogue. Of course, a Pentagon analyst who responds to situations in an emotional state, well, to a certain extent, their credibility is suspect. And it's one thing to vent to somebody who appreciates open and honest dialogue, but it can also get you into some pretty hot water. The third and optimal brain-body state is the executive state. This is where we're able to regulate our thoughts and our feelings and our actions. We can solve problems and we can learn. And in that executive state, we can stay focused to set and achieve goals. And at least in the conscious discipline model, the goal is to elevate ourselves and others into this executive brain-body state. Now, you've heard me say it before, and you're probably going to hear it again, but Pentagon professionals have to behave as if there is no crisis. When the geopolitical shit hits the international fan, you have to stay in control of yourself. I'm telling you, a secret VTC meeting with general officers from all over the globe who've come together to talk about some sort of surprise event, that is not the time to drop into an emotional or survival mode. What I find interesting about this conscious discipline model is the emphasis that is placed on the current professionals modeling the appropriate behavior for the new people coming into this environment. And Dr. Bailey structures the skills that have to be demonstrated into what she calls 7 skills and 7 powers. And just so you know, well, where I'm going with this, you'll notice that the Army values, well, there's 7 of those too, and you'll see a crosswalk. But I just want to touch on one point before I skim over these 7 skills. People who are in the survival state dwell on the question, am I safe? And by the same token, people who are in the emotional state, they dwell on the question of, do I belong or am I valued? So these 7 skills and powers, they're about answering those questions in a way that helps foster getting to executive function. Okay, without dwelling on them too long, here are the 7 skills that Conscious Discipline proposes leaders should model. And watch, because I think this hews pretty closely to a lot of military principles. Positive intent, choices, and assertiveness, composure and encouragement, empathy and consequences. And I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, or maybe I'm trying too hard, but this just seems a lot like the military behaviors that we try to instill with things like commander's intent, courses of action, military bearing, awards and recognition, respect, and after-action reviews. And while nobody said it to me while I was coming up, it seems like the goal of all those military behaviors and rituals, they're really there to help foster getting into that executive brain-body state under some pretty harrowing conditions. So do your part to set the example of executive function no matter where you are. And if you want to see a technique to deal with somebody who's dropped into that emotional autopilot way of talking, watch this video.